This is Popular Front, a podcast focused on the niche details of modern warfare and underreported conflict with me, Jake Hanrahan. Today we're speaking to investigative reporter Ali Winston. He's going to be speaking to us about a Terrorgram-influenced neo-Nazi mass shooting that happened in Bratislava in October, Bratislava being the capital of Slovakia. It went very much under the radar, but this is one of the first actual militant attacks that has stemmed from this so-called Terrorgram group, an amalgamation of various different far-right ideologies that gather on Telegram and have been putting out publications trying to inspire lone wolf attacks. Support us at patreon.com/popularfront. So recently there was a far-right mass shooting, a militant attack in Slovakia in October, in the capital Bratislava on a gay bar. It went completely, well, not completely unnoticed, but considering how severe and awful it was, it seemed to go very much under the radar on international media. We're going to be picking it apart today, but maybe first you can explain what actually happened.
This incident happened on October 12th of this year. So it was in a neighborhood of Bratislava out in front of a LGBTQ plus bar called Terrorgram, which was pretty well known in Bratislava. It's one of the local gay bars and a big center for LGBTQ plus nightlife. And that night, this kid, a young man, a 19-year-old named Juraj Krajic, will go into his background in depth. He showed up wearing all black. There's security camera footage of all this, by the way. The entire shooting was caught on video. Wearing all black, black baseball cap, black face mask, gets to the bar around 6:30 in the evening. And, so it's still a little bit light out at that point, but mostly dark. And he hides. You can see him on this video camera. He's hiding in an alcove across, next door to the bar, and then you can see him just kind of pop out from there, pull a pistol out of his backpack, and open fire. And he does a couple, pulls off several rounds, and ends up killing two people. Juraj Vankulic, who was non-binary, who was trans, and then Matthias Horvath, who was bisexual. They both come out of the bar, were on their way in, and the police turn out. This big manhunt comes out. They close off the streets there. A woman who was also struck as well was taken to the hospital. She was thankfully not. She was lived to tell the tale. She survived the incident, and they searched for Krajic. They had no idea who he was. There's a police helicopter. This sort of scene is not common in Bratislava. It was a big deal. And then at around 7 a.m, Krajic's body is found by the authorities with a single gunshot wound to the head, and investigators determined that he killed himself following the attack. So very, very, very shortly thereafter, they start sorting through the details of it, the fact that it was a targeted incident on a bar from the gay, lesbian, and trans community, and within a couple days, the police announced that they were investigating this incident as a hate crime, and as a result of some investigative reporting that I helped out a number of journalists in Slovakia with, it became apparent that Krajic had a deep grounding in the far right, in the transnational far right, and militant accelerationism, and that he had released a manifesto.
He was an actual neo-Nazi, right? He was a
True neo-Nazi. He actually released a manifesto that mimicked the manifesto released by Peyton Gendron, the young man who shot up a supermarket in a predominantly African-American area of Buffalo, New York, in the U.S. this past spring. And his statements included, he'd put up statements prior to the attack on his Twitter account. I've made my decision, raced first, always. His manifesto was up there on linked to his Twitter account. He also posted this material on 4chan, so it was kind of a shooting foretold in a sense. But no, it became very apparent through his manifesto that he was very well versed in the strain of the far right that you and I have reported on quite a bit, militant accelerationism that has motivated a number of what's called saints, these mass shooters who basically compete with each other for high body counts in these shootings that are designed to trigger more quote-unquote lone wolf attacks that target people, that target non-white or, non-heterosexual folks in order to kind of trigger a broader uprising against that and bring about somehow through the magic alchemy of hatred and ideology, this magic white ethno-state that they think will come about in the end. It's quite an insane ideology, and these people they're not mentally ill. They're deeply committed to what they believe in, but this is what his intent was. And he blamed Jews and LGBT people for quote, causing harm to white people. He venerated Brendan Tarrant, the young man who shot up the mosque in New Zealand in 2019, San Diego shooter who shot up a mosque in Poway, not a mosque, a synagogue in Poway, California, near San Diego in 2019. Anders Breivik, he went through the list. And also, key aspect is it glorified a guy known on Telegram as Slovak Bro, and who in real life is named Pavel Benadik, I'm butchering the pronunciation, who is a key member of a propaganda group that you and I discussed called Terrorgram, and was arrested in May 2022 by the Slovak authorities for publishing, Terrorgram-related materials promoting the overthrow of the democratic system by means of sabotage and terrorism, and also possession of 3D weaponry and printing materials too, 3D firearms and printing materials. So this is the short of it, and maybe I should have said this up higher, is that this young man, Kuciak, is actually the first saint to come out of Terrorgram. He's the first active shooter. He's the first lethal attack to come from the network of whose actions were triggered by or directly attributed to the propaganda network that published the Terrorgram publications that you and I were parsing this past summer, some of the recent propaganda videos. My colleagues in Slovakia and I at the Jan Kuciak Investigative Center, we actually, in our report that we published in early November, obtained materials indicating that Kuciak himself was in communication directly with the Terrorgram community and with the key members of that propaganda circle.
So with that in mind then, would you say this is, the first militant Terrorgram influenced attack that we know about?
Yeah, he's Terrorgram's first saint. And which is important because Terrorgram, one of the common themes of their propaganda is that they have systematically promoted a, quote, calendar of saints, and made up these individual saint posters, like baseball card type things for your American audience. I don't know, like, what's your equivalent in the UK? Like, is it Sabuteo?
We have like football.
Yeah, football stickers, like Panini stickers, right?
Yeah,
so it's the equivalent of that. These little baseball card Panini sticker type PDFs of each shooter, their name, their body count, their location, some quote from their manifesto, and these are all sprinkled throughout the various Telegram channels that they administer and distribute their propaganda through. And they put him very quickly into that pantheon, and that's the intent of Terrorgram. Their intent is to take people who are already on the right-wing spectrum, not that far out necessarily. Sometimes they'll go into networks that involve like boomer MAGA-waffen type people, like, Trump's January 6th crowd or whatnot. And they'll try and pull these people, as they will younger groups, into Telegram channels and smaller circles that push more and more radical right-wing violent propaganda. Like there's even there's a page of that devoted to that in the hard reset about how to radicalize the older crowd. And the younger crowd, they understand that very well. They use gaming, they use memes, they use very slick propaganda formats and graphics to draw folks in. And these sort of groups, these sort of propaganda networks have been very prolific and very effective at using platforms like Steam, Twitch, Discord, to pull younger people who are gamers and pull younger kids who game and who play, whatever it may be online, Fortnite, Minecraft, whatever it may be, the other sorts of other games. They pull them into these communication circles and just bombard them with this sort of propaganda and create their own new social circle around them that normalizes and basically makes a joke out of some of this stuff, out of some of this ideology, which is how it all starts, right? It's just a joke, bro. It's just irony, bro.
And if anyone doesn't know, the hard reset, it's kind of their like manifesto. Me and Ali did a whole episode on that. You can hear it on the patreon.com/popularfront if you want to hear that. But what was the Terrorgram kind of response to this? Were they aware of who this lad was? What did they say after this happened?
No, 100%. They were aware of it. They were batting around information inside their channels. They were very happy to see that. They even mocked up a saint poster for him. Like, they created a saint poster with his features, with, his, on the same template as every single other one that they passed around. They shared the manifesto. They spread it around. They even recorded an audiobook of the manifesto and distributed it. Yep. They were very happy. I mean, Kushak if you read that manifesto, it reads as if it's written by an American or by a North American. It's flawless English. He was a very gifted student. He was I think, an English immersion school and was one of the top students in his class. And they really, they looked at that manifesto as something with a lot of potential to further radicalize folks. The fact that it lumped Jews, gays, lesbians, and trans folks, non-binary folks, in the same basket, they really appreciated that. And it's important to remember that the accelerationist movement, this sort of millenarian neo-Nazism, neo-fascism, they view non-heterosexuals in the same light as they view non-white, non-Christian folks or ethnic groups. Like, to them, yep,
it's all the same
degeneracy,
basically,
right?
for them.
And it's all that is lumped in. And this attack was because it was so specifically targeted. It was accurate. Had a very specific target. Had a body count. The guy took his life. He committed to being a saint. He basically went through all the processes that you need to achieve this sort of sainthood or martyrdom. They chose to treat him as such. And, what's interesting about this is how Slovakia seems, a relatively small country in Europe, has generated not only the first Terrorgram-related attack, but the individual who was arrested in May, Slovak bro. I mean, he was prolific on Telegram channels. He was prolific in his online output, and they actually had to delay the publication of the hard reset once he was arrested.
Why?
Well, because he was so central to just their overall publication. I mean, you could see that in their communications, because they basically tease every time this group puts out a new video or propaganda, video edit or propaganda package. They'll tease it with little clips and little PDFs, drip here, a drip there, to kind of create its own hype. It's a drop, the same way that marketers have figured out you create a certain amount of buzz for a forthcoming album or a forthcoming book or a forthcoming film, or a fashion item that drops out. They'll do the same thing with their propaganda, and it's effective. Like, this stuff gets eyeballs.
So this guy has been called a saint in their fucked up, stupid little world. Why is it you think that he only managed to shoot or kill 2 people? Is it the situation, the gun? What happened there?
I mean, pistol. He didn't have an extended magazine. I can't remember what the provenance of the gun is. I can flip through and try and pull that up, but I can't remember the provenance of the firearm. But so he manages to shoot 3 people. fires those clips hold maybe 15 rounds top. I don't know what the capacity limits are in Europe. Might be smaller than that. Might be smaller than what you're allowed to carry in a pistol in the States. I would certainly hope it is, because our gun control laws are a fucking joke here. So he has 15 rounds, fires a few shots. People scatter, so the targets aren't, there's not as much of a crowd for him to shoot into. And yeah, I think, he's a young kid. He's able to, he leaves out. He doesn't have an extended magazine, so he doesn't have high capacity. He also didn't seem like he had a converter switch to change his firearm over from semi-automatic to automatic, which is really one of the biggest factors in whether or not these mass shootings turn into mass casualty events. We've seen that in the past few years as 3D printed firearms and components become more prevalent. So, precisely, and that's why, to go back to Benedict, to Slovak bro, that's why the authorities came down on him like a ton of bricks, because not only did they find the propaganda in his possession, he had a very sophisticated 3D printer in his possession. There's a photograph of which we've included in this article, and I believe there were also the instructions for making firearms. So he had the capacity to kind of manufacture stuff that was out of regulation. And you've done more reporting on this than I have, in terms of what one can do with a 3D printer and those templates. Like, you can make basically a little SMG, right? A little submachine gun.
Yeah. I mean, they can print these little clips. I can't remember what they call them, but they kind of sell them off as I can't remember. They'll say like, oh, it's a tie pin or whatever, but it's like a light switch thing or something like that. But it's what's called an auto sear, and they use them to turn a normal firearm into like a semi-auto. Switch. Yeah. But those things can be made out of a lot of different things. You know what I mean? Like, I believe they were made, before this as well. Just now they're a lot easier to make with the 3D printing. It's not like it's not a new thing that 3D printers made, if you know what I mean. But it's definitely something that they've made like 1,000 times easier.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also worth mentioning too that not only was Benedict Slovak bro, this guy pulled in by the authorities in Slovakia, a week after that attack on the Teplaren bar, the Slovak police announced the arrest of a 16-year-old self-radicalized individual, another self-radicalized high school student, who was also distributing extremist materials and instructions for making a 3D printer, right? And in their statements, they confirmed that detention was related to Benedict Slovak bro's arrest. He provided his phone. He started unlocking his account. He basically gave his passwords out. So the police went from having almost no visibility into this community. Within a few weeks, they realized that, oh, wow, there's a connection here between this double homicide and this guy who we picked up in May. We actually need to go back to his phone and figure out who he was communicating with. They get into this teenager's phone and they start realizing that they get into his phone, they see this teenager, they pick him up, they start dumping his account and getting access to his network. So it's an example of how a very small number of people can have a tremendous influence in the far right throughout, across oceans and across borders. Because a number of these, from information that I've been able to get, a number of the folks involved in the Terrorgram, in the kind of like their core propaganda cell, they're North Americans. And, all the timestamps on what the things that they're posting, or the folks who are little traces that they leave, the accents on the audiobooks that you listen to, they're very clearly Americans. So to be able to influence a country in the middle of Central Europe that frankly is kind of, I wouldn't say it's a backwater, but it's certainly not France or Germany. It's not in the midst of like the big, broad far-right currents that are kind of sweeping throughout Europe right now. It's very interesting to see how this place has kind of has been so impacted by this brand of accelerationism, that from everything that I've seen in our reporting over the past 5 years or so, like don't recall dealing with Slovakia beforehand. Do you?
No, but I know they have had like like an undercurrent of it, if you know what I mean. Not this stuff, not this like, this new wave, this Terrorgram, this multi-jointed internet thing. But certainly they have had, like neo-Nazis basically elected. They have a very strong far-right scene as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and actually, John Kuciak's father ran for parliament. He was from a far-right family. I mean, his father ran for parliament on the platform of this party. I think the translation for their party name in English would be Homeland. He ran in the 2020 parliamentary elections as such, and I'm sure his father does not appear to have disowned what his son did in all the remarks that he's made publicly afterwards. So. Yeah, I mean, there's also, I guess, the Feuerkrieg division, another one of these very strange, small accelerationist groups, which I don't believe they had any attacks put to their name or lethal attacks, but they were founded by a 13-year-old Estonian, right? Something like that. Yeah, there's some cross-pollination. Yeah, no, children, but a lot of these guys are children, right? You have to remember that apparently the shooter had been involved in accelerationism since he was young. The 16-year-old, the high school student who was arrested after the double homicide in Bratislava, he apparently had been involved with the FKD in some sense, and had been dipping into the accelerationist scene online since he was 13. This is a big component of this world. There are young kids getting involved in this, and that's always been a recruitment technique of fascism, to get the youth involved, all the way back to Mussolini and Hitler, the Hitler Youth, right? There's a new aspect on that now, and it has to do with the online world, because so much of life is lived online, especially for the youngest generations.
Yeah, has there been any response from like the traditional far right parties there, like what is it, the People's Party? It's called People's Party for Slovakia or whatever, our Slovakia. Has there been any response from them lot? Like, have they said anything about this? Because this is essentially the same cause, but from very different directions.
Yeah, I mean, it was condemned. The shooting was definitely condemned by the mainstream in the country, down from the president down to the prime minister. But I'm not really familiar with the reaction of the far right folks. I think that there were protests outside the National Council on the 16th of October, right afterwards, in reaction to this attack. And this is, it's part of the domestic politics of the country that I'm not that up on. It's not an area of the world that I spent much time in or have familiarity with beyond this, so I can't really answer that too well.
In terms of this firearm, how easy is it to get hold of firearms in a place like Slovakia?
Not easy. I mean, they're not as restricted as they are in places like Australia, but the kid would have to basically have been given the firearm by his father, and I can't recall what the precise provenance of it was, but it wasn't a 3D manufactured pistol. It was a proper, well manufactured working firearm. And he clearly had some training with it because it didn't jam on him. He was accurate enough to hit 3 people, 2 of whom lethally. And, I don't think, again, it's a handgun. It's not a rifle. There are different laws permitting handguns around Eastern Europe. It's not the Balkans, certainly. Like, there are controls on it. But you also have to remember that for a long time, especially when Slovakia was part of Czechoslovakia, there was a very strong firearms manufacturing industry there. So there are quite a lot of guns floating around that society. Not loosely, but it's a country. There are 2 countries. There were one country previously that had a very robust arms industry.
Yeah. What's the kind of public outcry been like from this in Slovakia?
There has been a tremendous outpouring of support for the LGBTQ community. I think that the marches were tens of thousands of people large in Bratislava following this attack that condemned the shooting and mourned the victims. The mainstream society and political class in Slovakia has come out against the attack. They've condemned it roundly. There doesn't seem to be as much of a blowback. There doesn't seem to be much blowback to that condemnation and that stance and support of non-heterosexual folks. And I think that the law enforcement apparatus in Slovakia has been kind of jolted into awareness about the nature of the contemporary far right. My understanding from my colleagues in Slovakia is that they weren't really up to speed on the similar threads and similar currents of ideology that you've seen in Britain, that the French have seen, that the Germans have seen quite a bit of. This kind of new, younger, internet-driven neo-fascism that's really spread across on both sides of the Atlantic. And now they've been forced to reckon with it. So there was an arrest that happened in Italy, I want to say, in late October, very shortly after the arrest of the young high schooler, who we mentioned, the 16-year-old, who was not the shooter, who was the person picked up as a result of what was on Slovak Bro's phone. There was an arrest in Italy that happened shortly thereafter where a young man was, I believe he was in his 20s, was arrested while planning to carry out another mass shooting. And I believe he had the Buffalo shooting as his template. But my understanding is that there was some connection to the folks in Slovakia. So he'd either been in communication with them or he'd seen what happened in Bratislava and took that as inspiration. But my understanding is that there's something that has to do with the high schooler's arrest that led to this action in Italy. So I think the agencies in Slovakia are now being looped into the broader European information sharing network about this stuff. I don't know if they were beforehand, if they took it as seriously, but there are different elements of law enforcement cooperation. There are different ways in which law enforcement agencies in Europe engage in this interagency cooperation through either Europol, through Interpol, ad hoc relationships between one country and another. But through the European Union, there certainly is the capacity to share information about investigations and potential threats. And I think that's now they've had that kind of bumped up on their priority list, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, this Terrorgram thing. It's mostly on the app Telegram. There is another app they use when they're getting more, yeah, for other stuff. But basically, this is growing. Would you say, like, this is still growing right now? This isn't kind of, it didn't kind of burn bright and flicker away. This seems to be something that's going to grow into more, real world attacks.
I guess this summer you and I were talking about, this looks like this is the sort of content, this is the sort of propaganda that looks like it will inspire violence. And lo and behold, what happened in Bratislava was unfortunately that prophecy fulfilled, which I don't take any pleasure in being right about that, but it was pretty straightforward for anybody who's observed this scene for some years, and that this was going to result in in death and in homicide. So my understanding is that it's been harder for Terrorgram to circulate their propaganda in the past few months because their channels keep getting knocked down, but they manage it very cleverly. They use screens and dummy names for not only their accounts, but for their the channel theme as well. That is the sort of, I don't want to basically say them to give away some tradecraft, but it's very clear.
I was going to say, don't bait up your position.
No, there's no need to do that. But it's very clear that every time they get kind of pushed back and deplatformed from the app, they manage to find an end run around that and get their information out there. So and these people are very, very interested in anything that gets put out there about them.
They love us, man.
Gotta say, imitation is the most sincere form of flattery, but or whatever, however you want to phrase that. But these guys definitely are interested in circulating more material. They have a lot of it planned. They're quite ambitious. Their video edits, actually, it seems like they're getting a little bit more into the visual content and putting, shooting of saints and whatnot, that sort of footage back out there. I think White Terror includes the Christchurch footage and a bunch of other wild shit. That's their most recent propaganda video from a few weeks or a month back that they were working on putting out right around the time of the Bratislava shooting. So yeah, I certainly would imagine that this material will be circulated with greater frequency. Based on the American side, like you are seeing a lot more familiarity and common recurrence of themes that would previously be just the themes and imagery that would be the provenance of Atomwaffen or the base or a couple of these smaller groups that now have taken on, even though they're defunct, have taken on this kind of afterlife as a repository, as propaganda for people like Terrorgram, as like and kind of a clipboard, if you will, for images and things like that. Because a lot of the Terrorgram stuff is taken, a lot of the visuals are taken from the Atomwaffen playbook, from their older propaganda products. So yeah, I personally would not expect this to go anywhere. There might be a named group that comes out of all this stuff, out of Terrorgram, that's associated with them. There might not be. It does seem like that the broader trend is to avoid grouping together in, I guess, clusters of more than three people to kind of stay under the presence of authorities.
It seems to me like they're more interested in guys that are never going to do any actual action and just do it from the keyboard, spurning on lone wolf attacks rather than actually trying to start movements, which is way more dangerous because it's completely impossible to stop it, to be honest, like that.
Exactly. There's no way of predicting it. There's no way of getting up on it unless, you get lucky with somebody's communications or someone's cell phone, or someone gets squeezed in a criminal case and decides to give another person up. No, that this is the sort of thing. Shootings like Buffalo might have been difficult to stop, although we still don't understand why. There was a FBI agent in communication with Peyton Gendron right before that shooting, and we still don't understand exactly why that happened, and who that person was, and in what context that communication occurred. So these guys will put their information out there online. They will put their manifestos out there online before they commit a shooting. But again, how are you going to detect that in this utter sea of dreck that is social media? And especially with what's happened with, platforms like Twitter, which seem to be now welcoming more outlandish content like COVID denial, climate change denial, anti-Semitism on there. They're not going to take this shit down, and they don't even have the personnel anymore to monitor it.
Yeah, I mean, that is interesting because I was very much of the opinion of, like, everyone fuck off, shut up, stop being so fucking dramatic, which to no, about Twitter, which to a degree was right. Everyone's like, I'm going to leave Twitter. It's like, you're not. No one's leaving, and basically no one is leaving. But the thing that, I believe very firmly in, like, free speech, even if it's horrific shit. But now you're right. There's literally, it's getting to the point where they're like, yeah, neo-Nazis are going to have a real voice again. Like, bro, what the fuck? I don't know. It seems very dangerous to me.
We've been kind of working to this point, unfortunately, where I think that's a bigger disease, that's kind of a bigger mental disease that's kind of set in amongst a generation of people that are very internet pilled and red pilled and kind of live in this edgelord society. And in Silicon Valley, Elon Musk is a great example of that. His social world has basically shrunk to what's on his that little rectangle in his pocket. And that the idea that you can have decisions that impact so many people be in the hands of one or two people. And, you can say that he's doing it to be a narcissist. He's doing it for ego. He's doing it because he basically is a shitty businessman, whatever that may be. Opening up the floodgates to this sort of content has real world consequences. Like, propaganda does motivate people. Terrorgram is a great example of that. Absolutely, 110%, because this kid, he's motivated by Peyton Gendron's shooting in Buffalo, right? Where did that one spread? That shooting took place before Musk purchased Twitter. It happened in May of this past year, and I remember this. The manifesto was initially uploaded, I think it was a Google document. It was gone within hours. You couldn't find it if you didn't save it. So the tech platforms at one point got relatively responsible about stripping out this type of content. Relatively, I say, not perfect by any means, but there were people on staff who did it. And then now that in the case of Twitter, which unfortunately has a lot of reach in the world of media and in the journalism world, so it is relatively influential, or excuse me, it has influence that's a little bit outsized, that has gone away. So and Telegram has a ton of problems. There are ways in which companies like Apple have restricted certain channels that you can view on their devices, but if you use a desktop SOC, you can view those channels no matter what. So there's the potential with this new ownership of Twitter for it to become a lot more tolerant of this sort of content. And as you know, it is very actionable and unfortunately has the ability to motivate people to kill, and has done.
Yeah. And to be clear, we're not saying Twitter is the same as Terrorgram, where like neo-Nazis are trying to advocate for murder. But the point is, propaganda can actually go beyond free speech and becomes actionable. When you're telling people go and kill, and then that becomes like a thing that can just be out there, these are the consequences that happen. Ali, is there anything else you want to say about this?
Well, I do think that it is really worthwhile. This, again, is another example of why it is important to not just to view fascism as a transnational movement. You have to look at the ways in which events in one country influence events in another, the ways in which groups and individuals in certain societies look abroad for motivation. You can't just dismiss it as, oh, well, that's happening across the world, it doesn't apply to me. In order to seriously track and kind of anticipate the developments in these movements, you do have to pay attention to the material and the sequence of events that plays out overseas. Europe is in the middle of a very alarming right-wing resurgence. It is not just the current government in Italy, it is the success of the party formerly known as the Front National in France. It's the rise of the far right in Germany, which is very prevalent on the streets. It's the rise of ultranationalist parties affiliated with Russia and other countries, and backed by Russia quite often. What happened with Sweden, where they had a party formerly run that came from a neo-Nazi street movement. They're now in charge of the government. It's really critical.
Italy as well. Italy has a government which is literally pro-fascist. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the prime minister showed up for her official photograph wearing a fucking black shirt.
And it was that guy as well, one of their politicians. He takes some report around his house. And he's like, oh, there he is. And it pans to a fucking statue of Mussolini. And people are like, no, they're not fascists. It's like, well, they might not be at this very moment, but they want to be. That's for fucking sure.
I know, right? Well, all we have to do with Mussolini is turn that frown upside down.
Well, someone said, why is the statue upside down?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, but on a more serious note, it's just, you have to pay really close attention to what happens in Europe. And the fact that this shooting in Bratislava drew direct inspiration from Peyton Gendron in upstate New York, who drew inspiration from Brenton Tarrant down in New Zealand. It's kind of this chain of events that hops across the globe and maps out the kind of geography of the current far right. Like, the borders don't mean much because of the internet.
That's a really good point. And it's interesting to see something so ostensibly American as a mass shooting then happen in Europe, but it's actually not at all surprising. I mean, to kind of, I don't know, to quote Robert Evans, like, it could happen here, like, and it is happening here. It's going to happen here, and I think we're going to see more of this. I think you're right. I think as well, this Terrorgram thing is particularly interesting because, in my opinion, it's the real launch point for inspiration for new mass shootings, neo-Nazi, far-right, fascist mass shootings. It really seems to be I don't know what it is. It's not a group. It's not necessarily a platform, but it's a cauldron. And out of that, there's going to be more of this, I think,
It is a cauldron. I think describing it as a cauldron is really, I think that's the best and most apt way to do it. Also, for those who are interested in where Robert Evans got that title from, It Can't Happen Here is the title of a 1930s book by Sinclair Lewis about the rise of an Adolf Hitler-like figure in the U.S. I recommend you all read it. It's a fantastic novel.
Yeah. With that, Ali, where can people find your reporting on this? You're one of the few reporters with your colleagues who wrote this that actually covered this extensively.
Yeah, I unfortunately am on Twitter. Yeah, I mean, that's just what I've been using for years. So I published this with the Jan Kuciak Investigative Center, Center for Investigative Reporting in Slovakia. And there's a version of this in English, translated into English on vsquare.org, which is where people can find that particular article. It's long, it's in depth. I have to give a tremendous amount of credit to my colleagues, Lucas, Karen, and Martin. Lucas Dico, Karen Kovares Solimos, and Martin Lain. I probably butchered their names. They really did a brilliant job in putting this together, and I was very happy to provide what little background I could on this stuff that just has been a very unfortunate part of my reporting for the past 5 or 6 years. But it's why you and I know each other, Jake, so I guess there's some good that comes out of it.
Yeah, speak for yourself. No, I'm joking. Ali, when's your book coming out, actually? Are we at a stage where you want to push that yet?
Yeah, absolutely. So in my other line of work, aside from chasing around Nazis and making fun of Jake and our other friends about their various troubles in Europe, so my colleague Darwin Bongram and I are publishing a book on the history of the Oakland Police Department and the possibility or impossibility of police reform. It comes out on January 10th from Simon & Schuster's imprint, Atria Books. It's called The Riders Come Out at Night, Corruption, Brutality, and Cover-Up in Oakland. It covers the entire history of this very interesting, iconic, rough-and-tumble West Coast city from 1852 all the way to the present. It includes a tremendous amount of history about brutal cops, racist cops, white power structure, the KKK, the American Legion, law enforcement's internal struggle there with whether or not we want to be brutal or whether or not we want to have legitimacy, the history of the Black Panthers, the history of the Sudanese Liberation Army, the anti-war movement against the American invasion, the American campaign in Vietnam, all the way up to the present day and the department's 20-year struggle with federal oversight. And it comes out on the 10th, and if you want to find that, you can find it at IndieBound or bookshop.org. It's available for pre-order now.
Cool. All right, mate. Thanks very much.
Sure, man. Not a problem.
Thank you to our sponsors. They are Grind Core House, an independent coffee shop. But yeah, check them out, Grind Core House, on social media at Grind Core House. The episode is also sponsored by Oracle Coffee Shop in Portland, Oregon. If you go there, tell them Popular Front sent you, you will get some kind of discount on your coffee. Also, the episode is sponsored by Propagandopolis, writing about and selling interesting wartime propaganda throughout history. Check them out, propagandopolis.com. If you want to follow us on social media, Twitter at popularfront_, Instagram at popular.front, TikTok at popular.front. And I think that's it. For anything else, go to our website, www.popularfront.co. Links to everything there, or you can go popularfront.cc. Similar sort of thing, but not a full website. Definitely don't know why we have all of these URLs, but I don't know. I ended up doing this that way. If you want to follow me or look at what I'm doing outside of Popular Front, it's any social media. It's at Jake_Hanrahan. Or you can go to my site, jakehanrahan.com. Hanrahan is how you spell my surname. Music in this episode, the intro was by Home, and as always, the outro was by Sam Black. You can hear Sam Black's music at samblackpf.com. Also, if you look him up on Spotify under the name Sam Black PF, you'll be able to find his music. We uploaded 2 of the soundtracks to the documentaries that we've done. I believe it's Plastic Defense and Frontline Hooligan, but we do plan to upload a lot more in the future. Unfortunately, we use samples here and there, and some of them get snagged, caught by the fucking Spotify sample police. So a few of the things that we did put up there got pulled down. But yeah, if you check his music out, samblackpf.com, you'll see it all there. Thank you very much to the high tier Patreons. They are Margosha, Rohan Irvine, Titus Perkins, Ryan Barbadillo, VS, Brian R., Evan Pank, Bradley Hope, Wizard Actual, Claire Hoffbauer, Benjamin Tupper, Chongus Bongwater, Elijah Finley, Siddhartha O., Cameron Collins, Nicholas Blomberg, Matthew Diffley, Claire, Liana, Robert, Sean, Christianovich, NTHG, Arturo Rafael Macias, Ethan Zwick, Elise Middlefar, David McManus, Tom Petrie, James Leons, Bradley Davies, No Dogs No Hamsters, Brendan Crave, B, Drift, RX, Tiki Lover, Ben Marshall, Dallas Dunn, Shikhar Gupta, LD50 Seattle, K Glitter Vulcan, Bethany Swoveland, Adam H, Derivative Fool, Bottle of Water, Larson 8669, Ivan Julien, Bjorn Kirsten, Diamondstein, Michael O'Connor, Disgrunt, Jack Doherty, Nicholas Butter, JD, Jav, Ian Froese, James Cully, Tynan Daly, Ethan, Shanklin the Painter, Fitz Madrid, Ed Coulthard, D. San, Mike Barone, Ben, Liam Williams, Proper Gander, Chris Cusimano, DZA, Georgia Arani, DR, Amy R, Rubicon, Frank Austin, Amelia Me, Christina Rivetti, Freya Northman, Neba, Noah, Andrew Hurley, Vida Provost, Brian McLaughlin, Tom Lochrin, Young Wasabi, Tony Bin, JL, Stephen Davila, Dan Dunham, Fletcher, Chad Walker, Lawrence Abrahams, Peter McCormick from What Bitcoin Did, Christopher Martin, and Ryan Sandercock. Thank you all so much for sticking with us on the Patreon.